I was discussing today about the work, and when we hear that phrase, to do our inner work, our spiritual work, what does that mean? In a very practical way, broken down in its simplest form. And what came through was to be able, whether comfortable or not in the initial process, but to be able to go within and identify a feeling. That's first. And then feel into the feeling further. Is there something beneath it? Is there something at the root of that initial feeling, which usually is a surface level indicator of something more embedded in the psyche? For example, a lot of times anger is masking sadness or shame, sorrow, guilt, despair, feelings of unworthiness, insecurities, inadequacy. And when we get to the root of a feeling, to be able to feel into it to the point of not being able to identify anything underneath it, if you will, we can then look to what we believe to be true that would allow that feeling to arise, because it is impossible for the feeling to exist independent of a belief that says it is true. And so the mind is buying into something that then creates a physiological, energetic response that we call an emotion, a sensation in the body. And we start to have a clear, logical, rational, putting the dots together style to the way we're looking at first what we feel, what's the deepest essence of what we feel in terms of an emotion we can identify, and what is a belief that we have active inside of us that we think is true, which allows us to feel unpleasant in an undesirable state, having a negative emotion, as we call it. For example, if I say there's a butterfly made out of tinfoil, there is no physiological response to that. There's no reactiveness. There's no history with that statement. There's no experience with it where we have a connection in our synapses. It's just something we heard. Okay. It did nothing to us or for us or within us. When we say, you're a piece of shit, that's going to make somebody laugh. If they, of course, know that's not true, they love themselves, they have a solid sense of self-worth. That's a peculiar comment. Are you sure you're okay mentally? It would either make someone laugh, or they would have just kind of a bizarre moment of silence, or somebody would feel affected by that comment. That's devastating to me. That's painful to hear. That makes me feel lowly. How is that possible? To hear words and have these completely different responses in our body-mind. It's because we have operating programs running with different beliefs. And if someone believes something to be true and another person does not, then the person who believes something to be true that isn't true will have an emotional feeling arise. And a reaction to it. Defensiveness, argumentativeness, feeling very down, going within, going away from people, self-sabotaging, self-harm. There's some type of reaction and response that the person carries out when experiencing something that resonated as a truth, even if it is not, even if ultimately, fundamentally, cosmically, inherently it is not, but it's something the mind bought into. And when we're able to identify a feeling, and then the deepest feeling within that feeling, until we can't go any deeper into a feeling, a word to identify the feeling, and we're fully accountable for simply feeling it. This is pretty accurate of what I'm feeling. Then we look at what it is we believe that allows us to have that feeling at all. And is it fundamentally true? When we find out that it isn't, we start to connect the dots in a logical, rational way of what happened in the original imprint that caused that belief to go on with us in day-to-day life throughout the years. What is it that took place? Where did it take place? Who said these words that made me feel this original feeling for the first time? Where's my earliest memory of it? How old was I? Were these my developmental years as a human being, as a child? We start to remember without reliving trauma, even if we feel pain arise, but our mind is creating an understanding in a way that allows us to recall the original scenarios that made something a current day trigger for us. And then we have understanding and awareness of that's where that came from. I don't actually feel that way within myself or about myself, but the emotion is still arising. There's still an energetic sensation. There's still a lingering residue. But as time passes, because of my understanding of where that came from, what I believed to be true that I, on the highest level of my being, I know is not. At the very least, intellectually, I know that's not true. Emotionally, I'm still feeling it. So I must still be buying into it. And then when things happen that would typically trigger that feeling that we've now identified and associated with a belief that isn't fundamentally true, we now have a rational ability, a tool within us to go and grab and start tweaking the moment, alchemizing the feelings, and breathing into it with greater awareness and understanding. That isn't my ultimate truth. Now I'm not as triggered. It starts to minimize in the intensity of it, and eventually isn't a trigger point at all. That's how we heal and transform into better versions, healthier versions, more balanced versions, more empowered and exalted versions of ourselves than before. This is what society calls the work in its simplest form, and it starts with being able to identify a feeling when it arises without owning it, indulging it in an unhealthy way, buying into it as ultimate truth, but feeling it and then identifying the root feeling underneath the initial surface reactive sensation. Because we might feel anxiety, but the anxiety is not stemming from something where we're under attack actually, or we're about to go through something horrific or incredibly intense. It's actually, I identify that I feel anxiety. Actually, what's under that? What's deeper than that? Oh, because when I was growing up and I didn't have any greater understanding about life, I remember feeling abandoned many times. And even when I wasn't physically abandoned, I was emotionally neglected. There was some form of abandonment where my needs, my core needs as a human being, weren't met. That was awful. I did not enjoy that. Makes me feel rage sometimes towards the people who treated me that way, because I didn't have any other awareness or say-so in the matter. I was truly a victim of it. I was on the receiving end of something that I just thought was life. This is life. These are the characters in my life. These are the things that happen in my life. There's no broader scope with which to view those moments at that time. And so we've identified that the anxiety was actually stemming from the idea of potential abandonment in a scenario where we didn't feel safe. We started to feel anxiety, and on the deepest level, it was a fear of abandonment. And that one is not worthy now, that I'm potentially not worthy now. I feel I may not be worthy now to receive the love that I need and I want, to have my needs met at a core level, because I went through something that showed evidence of not being worthy. Really powerful to do that initial step of identifying a feeling at the root, as deep as we can go until we've got the root of what, it's that. That's what I'm actually feeling, which led me to feel this thing like anxiety, anger, depression. Something just came over me that wasn't really because of the thing that happened, but it was amplified because of something that happened previously in my life that I'm remembering was the original imprint, the first times that I felt these sensations. I'm now identifying. So we've identified feelings, we've associated memories, experiences, and beliefs that allowed this to exist in us as a strong part of our life experience, as an emotion that actually affects the way we speak, think, make decisions, interact with others. It's huge. It's our life and the quality of it. And this is the work, identifying a feeling at the root of it, discovering a belief that we thought to be true, which enabled the feeling to even exist, the emotion to even arise. I believed this to be true about my life or myself, which caused the feeling to come up in my body, to move through me. I have a good understanding of it now. Doesn't change that I feel it when you're first doing this work, but it does transform it over time because we now have an understanding of it. And then the healing begins and the transformation begins because we're practicing this, and it becomes a new embodied way of being. This is the work. This is the starter points of great transformation and alchemy in this life. And it's for all of us to do and be rewarded by it. While it may not be easy or comfortable in the beginning, it is substantially worth it.